Hello, this is Daniel. First of all, I want to apologize about this morning. The WebEx meeting just totally let me down. Everything was set up correctly, but nobody was able to get in. Everybody was locked out. I don't know why that happened. I've done meetings for years with WebEx, and today it just didn't work. So I'm just going to do this presentation myself and then share the link with you. Um, Hopefully that's okay. So, all right. I want to talk about getting to your next ITSM destination and how to switch platforms in under 5 months. I'm a professional, so I'm presenting this as a professional. If there is anything that you don't recognize in my lingo, just let me know and I will explain it. We also plan to have a meeting uh, with a live Q&A session, probably through Zoom or some other media, and no more WebEx. Okay, so getting to your next ITSM destination. Let's talk about that. I'm going to say the first thing, you're going to be excited, right? There's a platform change and you're going to have a lot of enthusiasm going in, but you have to brace and account for resistance and not take it personally, right? The first impressions that you have with people that you're interacting with, work with them on your rapport, um, and these challenges, the resistance may come from the former platform supporters, although there is a reason why there was a switch, right? So they will probably be supportive, but don't count on it, okay? Uh, Leadership that wants to understand challenges in every meeting, it's probably better to just say, hey, I'll explain this in a one-on-one session offline rather than, taking 10 minutes in the meeting to explain what are the differences between asset management, CMDB, platform changes, and common data model and class management and all that stuff. Because ServiceNow uses classes completely differently than CMDB does for Helix, BMC anyway. BMC follows the DMTF standard, the um, DMTF.org that was established roughly, I don't know, 25 years ago. And that defined the common data structure for everything that's going to be in a production environment, and it was associated with ITIL. So this is why in a data description of like classes for computer systems and so on, you will see whether it is supported by DMTF or not. I did not see that with ServiceNow, and they have their own classifications for classes. So the migration of data, although it wasn't planned, some of it may have happened by transferring, mapping from one computer to another, and then having to explain that in that meeting probably wasn't the best place to do it, but it did happen, right? So none of this is personal. People's duties vary and there's a lot to learn and catch up on. We're all human, right? So people want to know, but make sure to establish and maintain rapport with everyone you interact with, because it's not optional. You need to be able to make progress. So with that said, you want to embrace the assistance. There's going to be birds of feather, people with a common interest in the end result, people who pushed for the change of the platform but have no technical knowledge, and of course, temporary contractors. They were hired to assist exactly with what you're doing. So find out who they are. Ask these questions. Are there any temporary contractors? Because you may not actually have the insight into the whole thing. It's a big thing that is changing the platform for the entire company. So find out who they are. There may be Scrum Masters. They may not be Scrum Masters at all. Usually, I haven't seen like Scrum Masters used with deployments, but technically it's possible. You could have an agile process that, has an epic, and that epic is to have a platform change. It's difficult to find a good Scrum Master that understands all of this and gets it moving forward. Okay. So first things first, survival needs to prepare for. Um, Discovery credentials. Right? So when I say survival, I just mean like this is what you need to prepare for in order to survive this transition, because you will be judged along the line. Every day there's going to be somebody that make a comment about how this is progressing and so on, and so you have to kind of have a list of things to come back and say, okay, yeah, we're working on discovery credentials. But I have to say that that was probably the most complex process out of all, to have all the discovery credentials in place, translating those over to all the network zones, because there's like multiple network zones. You may have production, you may have QA, you may have development, and there may be some extremely secure zone that nobody can get to, but you still need to scan that area, right? So you will have to find out who owns these areas and then get the credentials from them. You will also need to get the database credentials, because the casing gateway, which I will talk about later, does require access to each database, and probably the best way to do it is by service accounts, and these service accounts will be then translated at the SaaS solution at BMC. So it's not the same thing when it's on-premise versus this Helix SaaS solution. What are the network security protocols? It's good to understand what is the minimum requirement for your encryption keys. You may have drivers in the deployment that are not compatible with the expectations of everyone. So you probably should ask, somebody in the network groups to say, what is your minimum encryption key size? And it could be SHA-256 and above, that sort of thing. Get all the vendor contact names. This could be BMC staff that has interest in your success. It could be salespeople, it could be support people, it could be success managers. Make sure that you have their names, emails, and phone numbers right off the bat. These are things you probably want to do like the first week if you can, because you will need those. And don't be rude, right? Ask for permission to contact them, so that you set the expectation that you will probably be trying to reach out to them. So the long-term strategy plan, if you're going through this as a practitioner, you should probably use this strategy. Write down everything that you want to have a design, and then ask for either ADO or Agile process, and then write this down into like epic stories and maybe even sprints if you want. But like I said earlier, there is no Scrum Masters, but you still want to have it documented in some way. So that's the best place, because these things are already kind of configured and set up with the data structure to capture your idea, and you will be able to then show that on this date I wrote these down, and therefore you can measure how far you got from that goal. So you can ask for a Scrum Master. You will probably not get it, or you may get it. It depends on the company, right? Ask for the application owners, right? This is definitely a long-term strategy plan, because every company has a financial responsibility for applications that they're using. They're either in-house or third-party. Now, if it's a third party, there's probably going to be some license management. And even though you may hear from people that will say, we don't do that, you will quickly find out that that's actually not true. There's always somebody that does care, because they have to sign a check for that. So people do want to know who are the application owners, who can approve things, who are the VPs and senior management that are involved with that process. Find out who the platform owners are. These are financially responsible people that, again, have to sign a check for, using Azure or some platform out there on a regular basis. Although these contracts may last a couple of years, so it may be a while before you hear from them again for renewals. However, given how fast things are moving nowadays, we're like kind of on a New York minute across the world. It used to be much slower, but now we're just really moving fast. So having an established communication with the platform owners is a great idea. and of course, but the portfolio owners. So I want to touch on what is the difference between platform and portfolio, because many people hear portfolio and they think it's some sort of a bank account or something. Portfolio is basically, if you were to separate the actual expenses within the company, so all the platform owners, they have that financial responsibility to pay for the platform. However, the portfolio owners actually have no financial responsibility at all until they start using the platform. And until then, portfolio is an idea, right? Portfolio is a product that somebody has thought of to say, hey, we could probably make money with this. And then they go and find out from the platform owners what it will take to put that into practice. Okay. So if you get no answers on these, ask to document your plan on a shared platform that captures the date that you've asked for these questions. Okay. So that's probably the best thing to do for your long-term strategy plan. You also want to prepare your education. As a professional, you know that there is going to be things that will come up, like workflow, what impacts what. So I think the best idea is to set up a weekly 1 hour long meeting and invite everyone you can think of and those they can think of. And even if nobody shows up, record that meeting and then make it available on a SharePoint somewhere where people can watch it when they have a question, because people are going to be busy. Your CMDB responsibilities and asset management is probably the last thing on their mind. However, they will eventually have that question. So have that video ready, because to produce content, quickly is not something that's easy. You have to kind of commit a lot of time to it, just like I did today. So if you start your education right away and record all these sessions and use cases that can help you to tell the story, that's important for people to understand what your goals are. And then if you can, give visual examples of the workflow and add legends to it. Like here in this screenshot, I'm showing that BS means business service, SO is a service offering. But if I were to spell it out in the workflow everywhere I go, then this workflow would be very busy and I just wouldn't have enough room to define. So I use lots of abbreviations in this particular workflow here, and then added a legend and showed where it actually ends up. So here, from getting the business data all the way to the BMC asset data set and having relationships done, this is a bit of a reference for me as well, but you can talk about it as needed. Okay, so users of the system, they will probably need clarification on what the CMDB is, because most people will not know what the CM part means, right? But DB, everybody knows it's a database. So the configuration management database, and what is their definition, and how does it compare to ServiceNow? So like I said earlier, in ServiceNow, the way they're looking at things are, is it a server, is it a desktop, is it a workstation? Well, BMC doesn't do that. They use common data model that basically says there's a computer system, and that computer system has primary capabilities. And then from the primary capabilities enumeration list, you can choose it's a server. Then there's also product catalog, obviously, where you can do categorization of what things are. But the changes from one platform to another are kind of murky, right? So this is why I'm using this line over here where, if you underwater, you're looking at the water in front of you, if you can keep your eyes open, it will seem like it's just water, right? And that's kind of all the data that's all around you. Then you may have some danger. You're trying to get data out of, I don't know, like a network group or something, and there will be like very, restrictive and so on. Actually, I haven't really seen much resistance from network. I've usually seen it from like database people that have their own little corner with their data, and they will behave like sharks. It's my data, you can't touch it, and so on. So it will really not be clear unless you have like some idea to say, hey, this is my data structure. This is the reason I need your data. You will actually be the one that will be subscribing to that data. So why not work together, right? Here I put a slide here where it could be just toxic to get into that CMDB because it is so all over the place and has no structure. These may be like small departments that have their own CMDB, but I think the best way to just say that there is a structure. We do have a data warehouse, and we can classify your data into the CMDB. Just tell me what you got, and then show and share once you have the data in place. Okay, so some of the questions that you want to ask actually are, hey, this is an operating company. How many tenants do you have? How many business units do your organizations have? And are they all under the same operating company? So the questions then would be, how many tenants do you have? Is it, and I'm using the word Acme, it used to be like a generic term, but I guess, is there Acme USA? Is there Acme Canada? Is there Acme Brazil, etc.? And that will tell you, actually, it will kind of show you who is going to understand what your questions are, because when you're syncing data from Discovery, there may be different networks and different companies that are under the same umbrella. So therefore, the operating company and the tenants are kind of important, right? So if you just say everybody is a global company, you have a single tenant and go from there, it's probably the best way to start with a single tenant. So just ask that question. So is that it? Is the next question, does our IT department overlap in any way? And then if yes, who are the leaders and do they communicate with each other? Now, I think that these questions, when you ask them, they can seem like you're trying to get your nose into their business, but you will eventually have to deal with approval groups and owner groups, support groups, and all that stuff. So that will be a valid question, in my opinion. These are things that you really should know because you will be working on that anyway. The organizational owners, again, which is the best platform to work with, because there may be competing platforms in there, or which data sources you're reconciling from. You may have multiple sources, and understanding what the precedences are between those is kind of good to know. Okay, so at that point, you probably will sound like you're some sort of a robot, right? Because you're asking data structure questions and SQL queries and code and whatnot. And then you may lose friends quickly because they just want to talk about, the success rate and give a pretty good status in a meeting. However, there are some things that you can ask about. And in my case, I usually ask about the knowledge about the Osborne effect. This is a Wikipedia term you can find. Osborne effect is defined as a social phenomenon of customers canceling and deferring orders for the current soon-to-be obsolete product as an unexpected drawback of a company's announcing a future product prematurely. So that's the definition, but what it really actually means is that you may have a product that's taking too long to develop, and there could be other companies that are doing the same thing but much faster with less quality. But the product that reached the market faster with less quality will probably take lead, and you may run out of cash before you get to your desired quality level. So is somebody familiar with the Osborne effect? If yes, then you've kind of found your business people that they probably had to study this in school. The other question is self-competition in business. Is there internal competition between people? When you have several organizations, or several groups that may have the talent actually that just independently create the same thing, but the budget is then split between those three groups, they may be actually, as you may be familiar with, restructured together so that you have common folks together working on the same thing. So is there a self-competition? And if nobody knows the answer to that, it tells you, it does have it's an indicator to know how deep the people you work with understand the goals that you have set up for your platform change. And then the burn rate, there is a term, the EBITDA. You will hear a lot of people actually mention that, but that term often skips, the radar of well, I don't know. I just noticed that it's not always like understood what that means, but it is basically the burn rate of your day-to-day company business that translates into profit or not profit, right? So you probably want to work with people that do understand what that is, because what you're doing here with your business services is to cater to all that. Okay, the additional questions is portfolios. What are the business service offerings of the organization? What are the platforms? Is the technical offering on which the portfolio operates known to everyone that you work with? And what is the offering impacted by the platform outage? Right? Is there a scenario when the platform is out and the business is impacted where nobody can make use of any of the services? That is an important thing to do. It's related to the asset lifecycle, provisioning of systems, provisioning of applications. It's also known as stubbing. And additional questions would be, who are the owners? Who is the used by, managed by, supported by, approved by, and owned by? These are associated roles that you will need to use to create a relationship, probably as a dependency relationship or a role through the ASD asset people form. What are the products in the company? What are the produced versus consumed products? What are the services that are associated with these products? And what is the difference between the services and the platform on which it runs? So the question then would be, is there a list of product owners and approvers we can associate with services? And I think you're going to get an answer that says, yes, there is, right? Because people think that there is one, but there isn't one that's comprehensive across the board for the entire company. So in order to have your return on investment for this product, like BMC Helix, you probably want to see if you can introduce it to the entire company so that your platform is used across the company, and you get your ROI, the return on investment, with much more effectiveness than just catering to a small group. Okay. How will the service offering be impacted by severe platform outage? Yeah, I think I just repeated that same slide. So the next thing I wanted to know is what access do I have to the data? Is REST API available? So REST API basically means is a connection to a server that produces data or can give you data in JSON format. And JSON format is very common out there as far as transferring data other than XML format, and use that data for asset management, relationships, and things like that. So if that exists, you probably want to know whether it's possible or not. In 2021, I think you're going to find everything has REST API access of some sort, and then they all transfer in JSON. So the HRM integrator is capable of getting the REST API data, the JSON format, and then turn that into CIs and relationships and et cetera, et cetera. So it's always good to know what it is, how do you get there, and that kind of access could take a while to get a user account to. So you want to find out right away. Is database access available? Again, the answer should be yes, but it could take a while for you to get that access. And when you go live, you're going to need all these things, right? You're going to need the REST API. You're going to need the database access. So get that started right off the bat. Even if people think that you're maybe asking for things that are kind of far-fetched, but given how long it takes, it's best to start it right away. Who has the shadow CMDBs? That's also a question, right? So you probably want to collect the spreadsheets from each department and offer to store them in a non-BMC data set. They may come in handy later, so go ahead and do that. Get these from BMC as soon as possible. The casing gateway configuration. There's a documentation out there that explains what it is, but it's not very clear. It's typical BMC documentation that touches on the surface but not enough on the details, right? And I don't know why that's still so today, but it's just, that's the way they have it. See if you can get the web service credentials and access methods to the WSDLs, the web service data links, and see if you can get the REST API access to ServiceNow. Get it right off the bat, and then as people will ask questions about, can I get the ownership for applications from ServiceNow? The answer you want to have is yes, but I need to have the view built, right? So that is usually the blocker to get that view into place, but you may want to have a user already. And that could also take a while because it's not readily available, something you can get. So ask for the ServiceNow administrator REST API user for dev and prod, and you can use then Spoon that can translate the JSON formatted data from ServiceNow into data that can be useful in Helix. All right, that was a long list. Now I'm going to talk about the CMDB and single source of truth. Okay, so when you attend these meetings, people will talk about multiple sources of truth or single sources of truth, and the definition of that is basically it's a data source that you can trust, or trust the data set. They could be single or plural. They don't actually have to be a single source of truth, because reconciliation does use the precedence on attributes to define a specific value for a field, and therefore your single source of truth is really a misnomer because you have multiple sources of truth. They may be pulled from a single data source and then normalized, which basically makes it a normalized data source, or plural. They're pulled from multiple sources and normalized and reconciled. Okay, data elevation strategy for highly controlled normalization. The new data that comes in from Discovery or SCCM or whatever is out there, right? It comes in and it may be structured in a very strange way. It may be using naming conventions that are not standard or not easily collected by a report. That's actually the goal, is to have a report that goes and uses static values that have been predefined by the product catalog and have been normalized, so that you can run a query on, how many servers do I have, how many workstations do I have, and if the model isn't normalized, then it becomes a problem. So therefore, normalization is very important, crucial. It's been around for roughly, I think, 15 years as far as Helix goes. So it's been a very, very good road to get normalization working well. It also plays a role when you reconcile your data. So if you have data that fails to normalize, it will not be reconciled. And this is an important thing to know, when you do put the flag into your reconciliation job that says, I'm going to reconcile with normalization. So as the new data comes in, it will fail, and you can create a reconciliation job that runs on the failures, where the qualification says, give me all the data that failed and that is being normalized. So you'll have a list of normalized classes, and then using that particular qualification, we'll put these products that have failed into a product stage data set. You can then inventory those and say, okay, yeah, these are things that we do want to normalize, and these are the things that we want to keep out. So things that fail to normalize will be kept out, and only the accountable data will make it in. So for example, like, I don't know, like Snow captures everything. The agent, not ServiceNow, but Snow specifically, captures everything, like including free cell and Paint 3D and Notepad, things that are basically included with the operating system, but have no cost effect on the company at all, right? So why would we collect 3 million copies of that thing? So if you do not normalize those products, you can filter those out before they end up in BMC ASAP. So therefore, you only want to have those things that are accountable for financially in your BMC ASAP data set. So once you do all of that stuff in the product stage, you can then renormalize that data with like discovery, and then promote that into BMC ASAP. For reconciliation, this is a good question to ask in probably meeting, although that's a challenging one, right? Not everyone is going to understand what the precedence is for, like I said earlier, the multiple data sources. So when you have a precedence weight that is for serial number, does it come from SCCM? Does it come from discovery, or is there a value there at all, right? So for example, Snow can capture the name, and you may have a manual entry where you like add a tag number or something like that. So if you can come up with a report on precedence weights, and that's done through like a SQL query or something on the RE groups form, then you can actually deploy your precedences and your jobs accurately. And like I said, the goal is to get it done as fast as possible. So within those 5 months of production deployment, which I believe is probably a record. I've never really seen any other company do it that fast. Then you're gonna need that information. Okay, so delivery date of July 2021. That's basically kind of like what the block had in mind, although I think it was done a little bit sooner than that, and there were no delays. There was like, we're not going to delay, and we went into production, and it was done fairly well. I think the deck where the operating system and relationships between the operating systems and two computer systems were affecting the business offerings, that was on the board. The game was played all along, and some of these CIs that kind of weren't really visible from the top, but does it matter whether there is a Windows operating system or Linux operating system, or is this a Red Hat, or is it just like a free distribution of Linux? Is that what is my playing board? What is my kind of a long-term look of how my company is going to be offering its businesses? This layout, this desktop over here was kind of changing, so you can imagine like a game being played where each different organization came in at a different time, and they had different interest in the business offering, whether that was a portfolio. And like I said earlier, portfolio is more like an idea. Platform is more of an owner case where the cost plays a role, and then realize the expense benefit in the end. So you playing your CMDB card, you playing your asset management card, but overall the the winner actually is the asset management, because that's what the end users will be using. You have people that look at the smart IT through the smart ID console, and to them, what's important is to see, whether these assets are there, whether the people are there. They will probably not understand that there are staging data sets, but all of that stuff we were able to deliver within all that time. So when data ended up in the BMC Asset data set and it was in production, it looked like the game was able to unfold and go forward. So that is the presentation for today. And again, I apologize for the issues with the WebEx meeting in the beginning. We'll do better, and we appreciate actually. So when I was talking to my colleague here, we do like it better when we have questions and answers that we can do on the call, because this can get pretty static. But again, thank you for making it this far. We're just sharing this because we really love this work. It's the 21st century business, really. It's not going to go away anytime soon. We're hoping to go into space with this, but we haven't had a call from SpaceX or anybody that's doing any of this stuff. So thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.